All right. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Carolyn, and I'm so excited to have you all here at the Next Step sessions. This is the first session we've had in January, and these sessions evolved out of COVID. So originally, whenever we were all responding to things, I wanted to provide an opportunity for nonprofits to be able to come together and connect and really have an opportunity to share challenges with each other and to share successes with each other as well. So we started this back in 2020, and they've been such a great way to connect and continue to be engaged with one another. And so I talked to some of you about how we wanted to set up the sessions, what topics were of interest, and this idea of having a check-in was something that came up in almost every single person that I talked to. And so I want to just set us off today by giving you that explanation of our next step sessions. For those of you who are just joining us now, feel free to put your name and organization in the chat, say hello to everyone who's here, and get to know some of the other organizations. And at the end, we'll have a chance to talk more. This check-in today is an opportunity to really take a look at your organization as a big picture. And to do that, I've brought in one of my colleagues. Her name is Jodi Klebick, and we'll introduce ourselves in a little bit, but we'll have some slides up. So Jodi, do you mind saying a few words now? Just hello and welcome and where you're from?
Sure. And Carolyn, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Jodi Klebick. I'm the Executive Director of Multiplying Good in Pittsburgh. We're a national nonprofit. I am the head of the leadership community here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. I work with organizations to celebrate and activate and train on a culture of service. So I spend time with students in action in middle schools and high schools doing service projects, some of them for libraries. In Brownsville, kids are actually working on a project out of the Brownsville area high school. They raised over $300,000 to put a teen space addition on their library and got the state to come in and provide the free internet access. So we do a variety of things like that with the students. I also work with organizations and their employee volunteers and work with nonprofit partners to do nominations for unsung volunteers with a media partner. I'm a media partner at corporate programs. Sorry, I was just on a board meeting with a really great board outcome, and we talked about all these programs, and now it's a big swirl. But I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to see how I can network with you guys, answer questions, and learn something too.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So as we said in the beginning, we wanted to talk about just having a check-in for you and your organization. And when Jodi and I were talking about this, we had a lot of different ideas come up. But our main goal today is to help you feel less overwhelmed about everything that's on your plate and to come out with a few strategies where you know you have one or two things or maybe 2 to 3 things that you can focus in on that are going to help elevate your entire organization. To give you a little bit of a background about me and Curio412, it's a consultancy for nonprofits and small businesses. We help businesses and nonprofits to think a little bit differently about how they're connecting the value of their mission or their organization to the community at large. And sometimes this has to do with management structures. Sometimes this is fundraising strategies. Today, we're taking a look at sort of that big picture of your organization. When I first started in the nonprofit sector, I found myself in a position where I was very new to the nonprofit sector and was put in charge of an all volunteer nonprofit. And I remember having to do all of the budgeting, all of the marketing, thinking about everything that I had to do with the board, structuring board meetings, making sure that everyone in the organization was well taken care of, managing volunteers. And sometimes there's just so much on your plate that it's hard to think about, well, what's the most important thing to do? Because I have all of these balls in the air. And when we were structuring this session, especially today, I was thinking about that. And that's really my main goal, is to help you see all of those pieces as a big picture. And I love having the opportunity to be able to bring a session like this to you. Jodi already introduced herself a little bit. Do you have any other stories you want to tell about why you think it's important to help take a big picture look at your organization?
I did jump the gun, and I apologize. I'm really always into let's just get to the meat of it, right? But yeah, in terms of the big picture, as Carolyn said, we all juggle, have so many plates spinning, wear so many hats. There's a lot to consider. There's money, there's programming, there are boards, there's operations. It can be overwhelming, and especially this time of year, and especially this year. So I think it's always good to stop and take a breath and, reflect on what you want to accomplish. And the best place to do is to, talk it out with other people. It's okay.
And I think that's something that we've definitely learned, especially in these sessions over the past few years, is having some good heads to throw ideas around and really to think through what's going on in our organizations has been a huge help. When you all registered, we asked you a little bit about how you're feeling about this coming year. And so these are some of the words that came out of how you're all feeling. So I'd like, if you, for those of you that have access to the chat, go ahead in that chat and tell us how you're feeling right now. So these were some of the things that you said when you registered, maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But how are you feeling today about what 2021 looks like for your organization? You got hopeful. And a lot of these might be the same. I think we saw it when Jodi and I were looking at all of these things, looking at both the combination of people being very positive and optimistic and hopeful and energized about what's going on, or Victoria, like you just said, nervous and excited at the same time. There's a lot going on that we need to get our heads around this year. And so it's exciting that we have a new year and a new opportunity for things, but there's a lot of uncertainty too. Yep, definitely, Bob. And as you're thinking about how you're feeling, I'd like you also to put down in the chat, maybe in 5 words or less, what's your dream goal for this year? If you could accomplish one thing this year, what would that dream goal be for your organization in 2021? You can go ahead and think about that, throw that in the chat. Continue to move ahead and plan. Get caught up. Awesome, I love that, a strong foundation and a resilient team. Ooh, and yeah, in-person visitors. Sustainability. Fabulous. These are some amazing goals to work towards. Task for staff, major donors, donor relations. Awesome. I'm seeing so many great things coming in. So as we're thinking about all of these different things that are going on, all of the feelings that we have about 2021, all of the things that we want to do in 2021, by the time you leave today, we want you to feel a little less overwhelmed by all of those things that are going on and ready to enact some simple and focused changes with your organization so that you can get to those big dream goals and you can do that. You may still have feelings of apprehension or nervousness, and that's okay, because I think all of us are feeling a little bit of nervousness right now. Jodi and I talked a lot about the uncertainty that we're all doing. And so because we know that there is so much going on in our heads, the last thing we want to ask you before we really dig in is, what are you celebrating in your organization? Jodi, you can talk a little bit more about mindfulness and gratitude and why we wanted to throw this in to give people this opportunity to reflect.
Yeah, I can tell you personally, I've had since the beginning of the year, I've had several nights at 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and go with them, so, sort of a panic attack, anxiety attack, because there is so much to attack, right? And you have to be mindful and really kind of reframe, like give each other grace. This is something you've heard us say before in different meetings, I'm sure. Give yourself grace and think about, despite all the crazy things that happened, you're still here. You're still operating. You probably still have board members and you still have goals. So taking a time to like reframe where you are before you start down a path really kind of has put you in the right mindset. So I always love to hear what people are celebrating, right? It gives us a really hopeful, exciting place to start off with, because at the very least, can we be in the same place next year, right? So I'm celebrating that we survived, that we grew our outreach by launching an online initiative, and we learned a heck of a lot about what people want by being able to speak with them directly in their homes through virtual conferences. It was really great.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I see a lot more of the celebrations coming in. I see from Tina, 5 years of solid accomplishments since their founding in 2015.
Woohoo.
That's amazing, Tina. I love what you guys are doing with the consortium. Um, and then Karen, yeah, successfully thinking outside the box, and every new thing was a success. You're with the Zelienople Historical Society. You've had some great things happen this past year. Successful 2020 with donors and grants and a new space. Oh, that's really exciting. Reinventing yourselves. Yep.
30 years celebration. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing, Alyssa. Oh, and a 25th anniversary. Awesome. So there's so many good things going on. And I think that's important for us to remember too, is even with all the challenges, there are still so many good things going on in so many ways that we're all meeting our mission. And to get into some of the meat of what we wanted to talk about, our first question for you guys, and you don't have to put this in the chat, is where are your ducks? So thinking about getting all of your ducks in a row. And as we were thinking about where all your ducks are, what we're thinking about is each duck is one of those basic building blocks of your organization, and having all of those ducks lined up and you're able to see them and know what each of them mean. This will help to give you that big picture. And I think, did we have that Stephen Covey quote on one of our slides, Jodi?
Yes, I think it's the
Okay.
next slide.
So we'll move that to the to the next slide then. And as you have all of your ducks in a row, the quote that came to mind when thinking about this was starting with the end in mind. It's always important when we're thinking about our goals to start with the end in mind. And for us, maybe this is some of the goals we've already set out. Maybe this has to do with our mission. I think there's so many things that swirl around. If we start with an end goal, it can be easier to either backtrack and figure out how we reverse engineer that, or how we take one step closer each day to that end. And Jodi, you had a couple of examples from your organization about how this has impacted you, right?
Well, I just want to say, yeah, that picture this is really the answer, right? If you're picturing where you are at this time next year, it also gives you inspiration. When things get down, you're like, nope, I can see it in my head. This is what we're going to be doing. I'll be standing with this person celebrating something, and we'll be depositing that check. We'll be shaking hands with new constituents, right? I'll be greeting a new board member. It's like looking at the box when you get a puzzle to say, okay, I got all these random pieces everywhere. Here's what I want to remember I'm trying to focus on. And, even if that means, like I have with my Students in Action, all the students in all the schools were doing remote learning. They weren't able to physically be together to do service projects. And so we pivoted and came up with a program called Service from Your Sofa, and found out ways that people could do things to help others, even if they couldn't physically be there to maybe deliver coats or food or things that they normally did in the past. So another way to picture it is, it's January and you want to lose weight, and instead of focusing on what you're not going to eat, you need to focus on what do you look like in that perfect outfit in the mirror, or what are you wearing? What are people going to say? What are you going to feel about when you look at the scale, right? It's visioning. And I think that's the best place to do it. I worked with a board where we were at strategic planning in December, and for the next December, we all wrote down what it looked like and put it in an envelope, and then looked at it at the next December. It was really great to see, like, actually when we visualized that, what actually came true, right? So I'd like to catch up. I can't see everything that everybody's writing.
Yeah, we have from Alyssa, much easier to plot the directions if you can visualize what is to be in the space called finished or meet goal, for sure. For sure. And so as we're visualizing what that end goal looks like for us, this is the area where we really want to help you think about how you're going to get there. So you have your end goal and the big dreams that you have for your organization this year. And the place to start for all of it is your mission. And I know that we always go back to mission, mission, mission. And it's funny because even though we always go back to our mission, when I talked to some of you who have been to our Next Step sessions in 2020, this was a topic that came up again and again is, oh, we really we're able to get closer to our mission in 2020, or we had a hard time sticking to our mission. I think we need to revisit that. But either of those circumstances was always a question of, well, how do we dig deeper into our mission? And so the first point of starting when you're thinking about your organization as a whole is looking at your mission. It's the place that's clarifying purpose for what you do, the programs you have, how people behave and interact with your organization. And it provides that touch point for all of the goals and actions that you take. So when you have a mission that is very direct and simple, something that everyone knows, it helps those employees, board members, volunteers, donors stay engaged and motivated with your mission to continue to serve and keep moving forward towards that. And Jodi, do you want to talk a little bit more about how it doesn't change that drastically typically?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like if we went through a crazy year, and what you're going to find out is, like, if you really stuck to your 3-year strategic plan and you thought about your mission, when these things come up that want to help veer you off, or sparkly things happen, or somebody comes up with a really great idea that sounds like, oh, it'd be really great fun to throw a gala party, and you start to get away like start to focus on only the party bits, instead of like, why are we having a party? Who will benefit from this? Um, it's like when, like I mentioned, the losing weight, right? If you wear a Fitbit and you say, well, my goal really is to be healthy, or to lift up my grandchildren, or to walk on that great vacation in Ireland when finally I can get there. Then when it pops up and it says, do you want to do 250 steps? Well, then that that's the thing you can focus on in that 5 minutes that really gets you towards your mission. Um, and so no matter what's going on, if you're in a fuzzy space, this is always the first place you should go to help clarify your question or your direction.
Yep. And so as you have that mission in mind, think about how it connects to all aspects of your nonprofit. And when you registered, we asked you a couple of questions about each of these aspects, but you have your board and your leadership, you have your staff or your volunteers that are acting as staff, financial to deal with, you have all of your programming, your brand and your messaging, strategic and operations planning, and then evaluation and impact reporting. So you have a number of different things going on with your nonprofit. And as you're thinking about holding all of those things in the air, all of those are important to your programming, but what we want to do today is think about, how do you audit those? Think closely about which of those areas is going to be the most important area to prioritize for your focus, where if you just focus on maybe one or two of these aspects, you'll elevate the others to a point where you'll be able to increase your capacity and maybe save some time and keep yourself from feeling overwhelmed, because you'll have that direction and priority to go. We're going to focus on, I believe, 4 of these, 4 or 5 today. Which really came out when you registered, of the areas that you said would really elevate that mission. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into those. And then if you have questions about the others, we're happy to talk more and have you reach out after this session. And we've also put together a organizational assessment that you can take back with your boards or other leaders at your organization. And it just provides a series of questions to help guide you through. So we'll provide that at the end and in our follow-up materials too. And that will cover all of the different aspects as well. But as you think about all these different aspects, like I said, we're trying to get it to a point where you know that you have a few that you're prioritizing that are going to help all of the other ones. And so the question that you can be asking yourself as you look at all of these different aspects is, what do I need to let go of so my organization that can thrive? And Jodi, do you want to talk a little bit more about this and the picture you pulled up here?
So as I told Carolyn when we first signed on before you guys got here, I just got out of a board meeting where we were talking about our strategic plan and focus, and being overwhelmed and having a lot of ambitious priorities. And, it was a very candid conversation. And we thankfully, we had that concept of, like, of all the things we have to do, can we narrow it down to 3? And of all those things that we have to do on the 3, can we narrow it down to 1? And, in that circumstance, everything else would come in second to this main driving point. And when you did that, everybody lightened up. Everybody said, now I know what I can do. Now I can be focused. Now I don't have to be split with my attention. Now, if I can only give you this much time or this much money, this is what it's going to be. And so there's a whole sea, and you see in this picture, there's a whole sea of possibilities out there. And then you narrowed it down to a couple, and then you finally focused on the one. And in this great photo that I was able to take, it makes it look like everything's floating. You feel floating. You have a sense of freedom because now you know what to focus on, and letting go of the other ones or making them secondary when it comes to making choices is just so much easier. So yeah, I encourage you to think about what you can let go of. In this case, I will say we had focused on, was it board development? Was it fundraising? Or was it getting a very high profile partner that could help us drive more donors and members and programs and board members? And in the end, we decided it would only be, if we didn't have the money, we couldn't increase the capacity to address all the other things. Um, and if we could focus on what it means to be a board member to do fundraising, then we will have a clear understanding of when we recruit other board members, et cetera. So it became, everybody walked away feeling really excited and focused because we finally let some other things go.
And so today, like I said, we've narrowed it down to 5 different areas that really stuck out to us from what you said you'd like to dig in a little bit deeper to. And so we'll go through 4 main areas, sorry. And those are strategic planning, board and leadership, money and finances, and then marketing and communications. And we're going to go through them in that order because as we were talking about this, there were certain areas that we thought tied in well with each other. And so with that strategic planning at the top, that helps with your goal setting. That board and leadership is more your capacity and those people who are going to be in action to do those things. And then you need the support of having the financial capacity to do it, as well as the visibility and marketing to get that message across too. So starting with the strategic planning portion, as you're thinking about strategic planning, your organization may have goals right now. You may have a strategic plan in place. And if you already do, that's great. And I want you to think about how those goals were set and how that strategic plan was made and who was involved in making those decisions and where those responsibilities are, sort of all those questions, just to bring you back to the basics. And anytime when you think about strategic planning, setting a very limited number of goals, so no more than 3 to 5, because when you set way too many, you get into what Jodi was just talking about. You have a whole sea of possibilities, but you don't have as much of the focus as you need. And when you get that focus, you can really narrow in on what your SMART goals are. And if you haven't heard the term SMART goals, I believe, I always get the R wrong, but specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely are what each of those letters stand for. And so you want goals that can narrow in and really drive a specific area of your organization and your mission. And I know when we spoke, Jodi, you had a couple of things you wanted to mention too, just about setting that focus and making sure that you narrow in on what's really important there.
Well, again, everybody's had a crazy year, right? You all of a sudden you had to focus on how are we keeping our members or making our donations or serving our constituents or hosting events, right? And so you start back with that mission and you say, if I can get from here to here, what are the minimum things I need to be able to do? And then how am I going to measure that we're getting there? So I had a specific example of mine and now I can't remember it. And I feel really bad about that. Carolyn, I'm sorry. But, I would like to look at the next slides and talk about the being fast, because that's also a great way to draw that focus in. We did a program where we usually do an annual event that's 3 days long and brings people from all over the country. And we couldn't do that this year, and it's held in DC. And instead we had a 1 in a million campaign where everybody nominated each other for the great things that they were doing. And it helped us to focus on our mission. And it helped us to keep our constituents focused on our mission. And it also ended up driving lots of other possibilities. So one of the most important things to do is make sure you're always revisiting that. And so I think when you have board meetings or staff meetings, if you've laid out this focus, you say, we're only working on these top 5 things. And if we have to, we'll narrow it down and let something else go and only work on these top 3 things. Having frequent discussions, taking a measure of where you are is important. Keep being transparent, being ambitious, and having milestones. So it comes down to being not just smart, but fast. And not fast isn't like speedy and overlooking things, but it's, again, frequent discussions, having big goals and being ambitious with the ones that you can focus on. then measuring them to keep them in front of you and knowing where you need to go, having milestones, and then making sure that everybody is engaged. It never works if not everybody's engaged. If it's not transparent, we can't all be a team. So yeah, the idea is only good as the execution. Um, and I don't know if you have large staffs or large boards, but that shouldn't hold you back. If you have small boards and small staffs, that also shouldn't hold you back, as long as you keep these types of things in mind when you do your focus.
Definitely. And as you're doing all of these things and making sure it is transparent and people are engaged, that's where we get into the next area we wanted to talk about, which was the board and leadership. And we identified a few areas that if you take a look and kind of assess where you are, you'll get a clearer understanding of maybe the direction you need to go with your board and leadership. So the top thing for us was understanding roles. There's nothing worse when someone doesn't have a clear objective or doesn't know exactly how they can help your organization. So whether you're the executive director, the board chair, or just a volunteer, understanding what your role can be in supporting the mission of that organization is important. And if you're a leader in that organization, like the board chair or the executive director, making sure that you're managing and engaging people in those roles. So if you have a leadership position, being very clear and transparent, talking to people about how they can best help, and being very explicit about that will help them to engage more. Those people, like Jodi's talking about her board that just met, once they know what those goals are and where they can fall and how they can best contribute, that is a great way for those people to be engaged with your organization. So you can think about, as you're assessing where your board and leadership is, if people understand those roles and who's managing those roles, who's engaging, and who's responsible for that as part of their larger role in the organization too. And I'm going to let Jodi talk a little bit more about nurturing culture, because that's all part of this too, is making sure you have a good environment in which people can feel comfortable discussing and taking charge of those responsibilities that they've been given for your mission.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, like as she mentioned, this last board meeting, the last hour, we came to it with a really overly ambitious strategic goals and really high shooting budget. A lot of money to be raised and a lot of big things to accomplish. That we realized by being able to be candid that our smartest attack wasn't to do all of them. What like as you mentioned, to focus, but that was able to happen because we have a culture of trust, but we also have a culture of philanthropy where we understand that everybody in the organization and the board is there to share about the good news that you have, right? We are here to give away programs. We are here to invite people to be part of this culture of goodness, or this culture of whatever it is that you're doing to serve your constituents, right? Um, and that by doing that, it becomes focused on the mission and focused on the constituents and focused on the donors. And it doesn't feel like, oh my God, this bottom line is going to kill me. It becomes, I'm so excited, people are going to want to help me with my bottom line. I have something wonderful to share and I'm willing to engage with everybody. And so I think our board turned a corner on that, in that they used to feel it was a burden that they had to ask people to participate or they had to make referrals. Now they understand that, oh, I can give this program away and we can help more young people. I can make this introduction, because if they bring this culture into their organization, more people will be happy and serving other people. So having a clear understanding of what that means in terms of a board role or a staff role really does help people engage with the focus and the strategic goals that you're trying to accomplish. And then it makes it easier to go and actually start working on the tasks and the tactics that are needed to get there.
Right. And culture can be something too that, as you're assessing what that looks like in terms of just your leadership and overall picture of what's going on. I know I recently had a conversation with a nonprofit who they've just revitalized their strategic plan. Their board is in great shape, but they know that their office has a very challenging time with culture. They've had a lot of things happen in the past decade that they're struggling with. And they know that if they don't address that culture first, they're not even going to get to their strategic plan because they can't get to a point where people are working together. So sometimes as you're looking through these different elements of the board and the leadership, maybe your starting point is culture. If that is something that you see as being a big problem in your organization. And if it's not, then you might be able to parse out some other areas like the understanding roles and managing and engaging too. But as you get further and further into that and people do understand their roles, they do have that sense of how they can contribute. The next thing we wanted to talk about was the money and finance element of your nonprofit. So within your organization, there are going to be people who have that financial thinking and forward thinking. Usually that's in your leadership, your executive director, but it may also be a finance committee or treasurer, whoever deals with the money at your organization. And having a good sense of who has that role, who has that responsibility, and also making sure that the people who have that responsibility are comfortable and confident with looking at things like financial statements or creating a budget that's going to work well with the strategic planning that you've already set, and have that understanding of who's going to be involved with the financial element. And so that's important on a role side, is just having that financial thinking, knowing what supports people need in order to really be good stewards of your organization. The other thing is understanding about return on investment. And I think when you talk about ROI, return on investment, a lot of people think about sales in the business world and think about how much money goes into X, Y, and Z. And we've seen stats like that before, where how much does it take to cultivate a donor? How much money are we putting into our mailings and our time? But return on investment doesn't necessarily have to just be your money and your finances too. It doesn't always turn out looking like direct donations, but it could be something more along the lines of how much is your reach expanding because of what you're doing and what you're investing in? How much are you saving because you're running your program a certain way? And how much time are you saving? Is that saving, if you have paid staff members, does that save you money on those staff members who now have time to perhaps put their efforts and energy into other elements of your program that are really going to help your mission? And Jodi, you had a really great example when we were talking about your recent wine fundraiser. I'd love for you to share that with everyone.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, it was really interesting. We were trying to figure out how to do fundraising and fundraising when we couldn't do live events, and we ended up with a concept of a wind down, because everybody's tired. Everybody needs someplace to vent and just to be in good company and meet other people. And whether you like wine or not, it was a great place to aggregate a bunch of folks. And we had a Facebook page set up. We invited others to join. Over the course of a couple weeks, there were daily posts that were talking about wine, but we're also talking about community, telling stories of service, highlighting our students and employees and folks doing great things in the community. And then we got together and had an event where the wine consultant did some, we did some tastings. Everybody either bought something ahead of time or used what they had at home. A portion of those sales were donated. And then people had also the opportunity to make a donation directly. And we made some fair money, but it was a small event. But the great thing was, the metric that we're using isn't only about just the financing in the moment, it's about the long-term potential. So we had new people, so we have a potential for re-engaging with them. There were 63 people that were new to the organization I had never engaged with directly regarding the organization, who are still with us, who are willing and able to read those stories of service. There are people who made donations out of pocket that had never done so before. And the lifetime value of those donations and those networks is far exceeded, like probably 15 times what we made on the day of the event. So if that's our metric, then we actually could be making a lot more money in repeating of these events than rather focusing on just the bottom line in the course of an hour or so.
Right.
So it's another way to look at it.
Right. And I've talked to one organization too that is a very new nonprofit, and they are similarly thinking. They did their first fundraising, and I believe they only raised a couple $100. And someone asked, was it a success? And they told them how much they raised, and they said, oh, well, I'm sorry, it doesn't sound like it was successful. And the person who put it on said, no, I didn't care about how much money I made. I just wanted to make sure my process worked so that when we do attract more donations, the process is smooth. So thinking about that when you think about your money and finances too, is thinking about those unintended or maybe intentional things you're doing to create future opportunities, future paths to new donors or new engagement with your organization, or thinking about the new things that you're doing that will help you save time, like figuring out those processes ahead of time to make sure that things are running smoothly. And that sort of brings us to the last area of thinking about money and finances, is how does your organization think about that sustainability? So how do you think ahead, and how do you think about what will help you to bring in that stability in the future too?
And again, as you heard me mention before, with my recent board meeting, a high profile partner might be an opportunity for awareness or financial stability, but it's also something that takes a long-term investment to achieve. So you have to measure about where it is you want to be, go back to that big picture, and maybe the time it takes to get that investment will be worth it, because it will then have a threefold effect once it does happen. But there might be sacrifice in the interim. Knowing that and having that vision makes that approach easier and more achievable.
Definitely. And then the last thing we want to talk about ties in with really all of the top three and every other part of your mission of your organization, and that's your marketing and communications. And when I think about marketing and communications for organizations, I think about clarity and consistency above anything else. So when you have a very clear message and a simple message, people are much more likely to connect with your organization and know exactly what you do, how you do it, why you do it. And the other part of having that consistency is having multiple touch points. So I know we talked about this in some of our past sessions, where we talked about if you have a donor or potential donors, when you look at the marketing world, it can take an average, at least on online marketing, of 33 touch points for someone to even recognize what service you're providing or what opportunity or event you're providing. And so in order to really drive that home, you need to be very visible and very consistent. So knowing that you have a plan in place for, say, your social media marketing or your email, or if you have a blog as part of your organization, or even physical mailings and physical ways you communicate with people, knowing that all of those different areas are going to be touch points for either your potential donors and visitors or your current donors and visitors. And that's going to help really develop a stronger and deeper relationship with them. And Jodi, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that donor area and how to be donor centric in those messages.
So, I'm trying to think of what typically and historically we send out as nonprofits, like, here's what we do, here's what we have, we need money, instead of telling stories of like having someone else talk about the impact of the organization on them independently, right? Whether it's, you've heard stories of constituents. Well, if I hadn't had this help from St. Jude, I might not be able to walk again, right? And I know that's an extreme sounding example, but maybe having a person who is secondary to that talk about the impact, or maybe it's a board member who said, I joined this board. It's a short story. You have a picture of them, and in their own words, they're like, I know that everybody's busy, but I found out when I participated with this organization, it changed my life because I've met these kinds of people, and it really has been impactful on me in this way. Now they're telling the story. They're having that third party endorsement, so to speak, having it come from the heart, be warm, and be really at the heart of why people want to support you. It definitely can drive a lot more attention to your brand, get people to understand where you're coming from, and really give them an opportunity to understand, well, if that's where they fit in, maybe that's where I could fit in.
And I love the example of the story you gave. I attended something recently which was talking about storytelling, and the person who was presenting said, okay, so stories have a beginning, middle, and end, but that's not what makes the story. So for example, we all got on a Zoom call today as the beginning of this. We all learned something new and shared with each other, and then we all went home. But that's not really a great story. I know that Sue, you shared something with me about how Zelianopal has really been able to exemplify its mission even through COVID and think in new ways that you never did. And I remember you told me that after one of these sessions, and that was a very powerful story for me to hear, because I enjoy putting these on and I love seeing the impact that it can have on people, but oftentimes you don't get that quite direct back and forth. And so I appreciated learning that. And those are the types of stories that once you're able to show that there was a direct impact made because of what was done, that is an area where if you can tell that story about your organization, you'll have people really resonating with the impact that you're having. And I know, Jodi, you've had many of those experiences through the students that you touch in the organizations that join Multiplying Good to help their employees and get more involved with service. So
Yeah, I love our communications department. We run a variety of things from a blog to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, right? We do newsletter outreach. We hold special events. But one of the really great things is making, when we have winners, all the winners give a speech, and it's a 1-minute speech, and it really is about their story. And it's always a way that someone else can recognize, well, if it's called, celebration is inspiration, right? If you're inspired by someone else's story, you can say, oh my gosh, well, this person ended up, they lost their spouse, they lost their daughter, had to survive this horrible disease and this flood, and yet they were able to come back and give 50% of their income to help people like them do this. Well, then all of a sudden you're like, well, gosh, I want to be part of that. And I could give 5% of my income, and that wouldn't be a big deal, right? Compared to that person, I'm so much more blessed or privileged, or whatever it might be. It really does put it in a different perspective. So, yeah, think about maybe ways that your constituents or your board members or your staff could tell a story that impacted them about why they participate with you. And 1-minute story from the heart, really, it's coming from the heart makes the biggest difference.
right. And a lot of the things that we're talking about here in terms of the messaging isn't so much to say you have to do all of these things, but rather as you're reflecting on your own marketing and communications, really ask yourself if you have a simple and clear message, if you have a plan to have multiple touch points, and if the stories that you're telling are those types of meaningful stories, and maybe that's an area that you can end up strengthening and really elevate a lot of the other areas and aspects of your organization. And tie that in with the larger goals and dreams that you have for 2021 and the larger goals for your organization. So use this as an opportunity to really reflect on what you're doing in that marketing area. And that takes us through all 4 of those areas that we really wanted to dig into. We know those were the ones that you identified as being most important. And Jodi, I'm going to let you take it away with this slide.
Well, as you can see, if you look at this slide, like there's the arrow that says you are here, right? Like the big map, it's like there's a giant city, there's all kinds of roads, there's all kinds of directions and distractions. And pretty much all those squiggly lines is 2020, right? We all didn't know where we were going. We're all over the road trying to figure out what's the right path, how do we get back into focus, and go forward in a straight line towards our goals. But if you think about it, no matter what happened over the last year, and again, I'm not discounting in any way any person who was deeply impacted by health and death in their lives and unemployment and all those horrible things that happen to people. But in terms of your nonprofit, really, what is different starting this January than starting last January? Probably actually not much. You may have tweaked the way you tactic things, the way you actually approach solving the problems, but your reason for being, as we talked about in the beginning, your mission, your focus on what you're going to celebrate next year is probably exactly the same as it was last year, but maybe with a deeper perspective from what we learned from dealing with all the travails of the last year. So maybe if you want to put it in the chat, this will be the last chat question is, do you feel that you're in a same, better, or worse place? Really, what is different in the last year? I would say probably not as much as as you might at first think. Better, better. Yes. Love that. Yep.
Have a lot of betters coming in.
So better is the place to be. I love that. Oh, pardon me.
Well,
Yeah, I think we're all better for it. I think we learned what was important. We got to be more intimate by actually like looking each other in the eye on Zooms in our homes and learning about our furry and tiny assistants, um, and really said, okay, what can we cut out to get focused on what's the most important thing we need to do? And I'm glad to hear it's better. Hope different means not bad, just different.
Say better.
Yeah, it says we're in a better position overall, even though we had less funding than last year.
Mm-hmm.
Who would ever thought that would be a statement, right?
And I'm going to take us to our last slide just to give some information of our contact details. We're by no means done. We'd love to chat with you and answer questions, but like I said, I'm going to stop that recording so that we have a chance to all talk face to face without the slides in the background. So the slides and the presentation will be shared. We'll share with you that organizational assessment too. And I'd also like to give you two invitations right now before we open it up to Q&A. The first is we have created a group on Facebook called the Resiliency Collaborative, and it is a place for nonprofit professionals, community leaders to come and share ideas. We'll be sharing a lot of resources that including things like this organizational assessment all throughout this year. And so if you would like to join, we would love to have you. I know Jodi's been a part of it for I think the past week or so. And so we have so many people just engaging with each other there. So I'm going to put a link to that group in the chat, and we would love to see you there. And I know Jodi had a few things from Multiplying Good that are coming up that she would love to see some of you participate in too. So I'll let you invite them to that too.
Well, as I mentioned, we work in a variety of possibilities, all regarding service. And so I would guess each and every one of you work with volunteers, whether they're board members or actual volunteers who sit and do the work that a paid person might do. To do that, we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to nominate them for service, whether at a local level or even a national level. So if you go to multiplyinggood.org in the top right corner, there's a button that says nominate, and you can select Pittsburgh, or you can select a different market if you work in multiple markets, or at the national level. And they will be put into a process to be selected as future Jefferson Award winners. And if you are working with young people who come to your facility, we do give away a service, like I said, called Students in Action, where we provide training online, in person, and recognition and celebration to help young people become leaders through service to others. So they might be the people who are serving your organization as a nonprofit. And if you already have volunteer young people doing that in middle school or high school, I have a program that can help them do that even better and to scale in a deeper way as well. And would love to be able to give that away. So I'm here for you if you need it. Let us know how we can help. And